I want to tell you about the day my parents divided what they had built. Not equally, not with any pretense that the two sides of the division were equivalent. My sister Claire received the house, 4 bedrooms, a garden my mother had tended for 30 years, the address where we had both grown up, the kind of property that holds value not just financially, but in the specific emotional currency of a family home. I received a storage unit, Unit 14B at Riverside Self-Storage on the edge of town, climate-controlled, monthly fee prepaid through the end of the year. The contents? My grandfather's things. My parents were not dead. I want to be clear about that. This was a living inheritance, the redistribution of assets that older parents sometimes do when they want to see things settled while they are still around to do the settling. My father was 71, my mother 68. They had gathered us for dinner on a Sunday, the specific energy of a formal occasion dressed as a casual one, and presented what they had decided. Claire received the house because she had children, because she needed stability, because she was the older daughter, and the house had always been, in some unspoken understanding that I had apparently missed, hers. I received the storage unit because my grandfather had left his belongings there before he passed 3 years earlier, and nobody had gone through them yet, and it was time someone did. "We thought you'd appreciate it," my mother said. "You were always close to him." Close to him? A sentiment that had apparently translated in the mathematics of my parents' planning into a climate-controlled unit on the edge of town. Claire had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable enough to say anything, but uncomfortable in the way of a person who has received something significant and is aware that the receiving is happening in front of someone who received something less. My mother poured wine. My father explained the reasoning. The children, the stability, the practicality of keeping the family home in the family branch that needed it most. All of it logical, all of it reasonable, and all of it, I noticed, presented as settled, not a conversation, not an invitation to discuss, a presentation. I listened. I nodded at the appropriate moments. I ate my dinner, and I said, "When can I get the key to the unit?" My father looked mildly surprised. "That's it?" he said. "You're not—" "I'll go on Tuesday," I said, "after work." He handed me the key. I took it, and I finished my dinner, because I had learned, from my grandfather actually, that the moment of discovery is not the moment of reaction. Those are two separate moments, and confusing them is always a mistake. I went on a Tuesday evening, after work, alone. James had offered to come. I had said I wanted to do it alone first, to have whatever the first hour was going to be without audience. He had understood. Riverside Self-Storage smelled like every storage facility. Cool, slightly metallic, the absence of air rather than the presence of it. Unit 14B was at the end of the second corridor. The lock was stiff. The door rolled up with the specific protest of something that had not been opened in 3 years. My grandfather's name was Arthur William Carter. He had been an engineer, retired before I was born, but an engineer in the specific way that people are things, completely, in every room, for their entire lives. He had built things, restored things, collected things. The unit was organized in the way his workshop had always been organized, with the specific system of a man who knew where everything was and had placed it accordingly. Boxes labeled in his handwriting, tools arranged by function, furniture covered in moving blankets, and in the back, pushed against the far wall covered in a canvas tarp that had been tied carefully at the corners, something large. I started with the boxes, my grandfather's handwriting on every label. Books, engineering, tools, electrical, personal, letters. I opened the personal box first. Letters, decades of them, cards, photographs, the accumulated paper trail of a long life lived deliberately. I sat on the floor of that storage unit and read for 2 hours. Not all of it, but enough to understand that my grandfather had been, even more than I had known, a specific kind of person. A person who noticed things, who documented them, who had opinions about fairness that he expressed in writing with the same precision he applied to everything else. At the bottom of the personal box was a sealed envelope, my name on the front, his handwriting. "Emily, open when you're ready." I held it for a long time. Then I opened it. It was 3 pages, a letter, written 2 months before he passed, addressed to me specifically. He wrote about many things: his life, his work, the specific satisfactions of a man who had built things that lasted. And then he wrote about the tarp in the back of the unit. "I've been collecting for 40 years, he wrote. "Your parents never paid attention. Claire never asked. You were the only one who ever sat with me in the workshop and wanted to understand what things were worth. What's under the tarp is yours," he wrote. "I always intended it to be yours. Have someone look at it properly before you decide anything." I went back on Saturday with James, and with a contact I had called on Wednesday, a woman named Patricia O'Coffer, who worked in fine art and antiques appraisal and who had agreed to come on short notice when I described what I was looking at. Patricia arrived at 10. She was practical, professional, the specific energy of someone who has been in many storage units and many estates and has learned to neither overreact nor dismiss. We went to the back of the unit. James untied the canvas tarp. We pulled it back. My grandfather had been collecting vintage American folk art, not casually, systematically. Paintings, sculptures, decorative pieces from the 19th and early 20th century, the specific category of American art that had spent decades being undervalued and had in recent years been experiencing a significant reappraisal. Patricia moved through the pieces slowly, carefully, with the focused attention of a person doing real assessment rather than casual browsing. James stood beside me. I watched Patricia's face. She was not a person who showed things easily, but there were moments, small ones, controlled, where something crossed her expression that told me we were not looking at a storage unit full of worthless old things. Patricia came to me an hour later. She said, "I need to be careful about preliminary estimates," she said. "Some of these pieces need proper research and authentication before I can give you firm numbers." "Understood," I said. "But I can tell you," she said, "that what you have here is not insignificant." "How not insignificant?" James asked. Patricia looked at the collection, then at me. "There are 3 pieces here," she said, "that I would want to put in front of a specialist immediately. If they authenticate the way I believe they will—" She paused. "Emily, your grandfather was not collecting casually." "What does that mean in practical terms?" I said. She named a range. I sat down on a box of engineering books. James put his hand on my shoulder. "He knew," I said quietly. "He knew what he had." "He certainly seems to have," Patricia said. I told my parents 3 weeks later, after the preliminary authentication had come back, after Patricia had put 3 of the pieces in front of the specialist she trusted, after the numbers had become real and documented, and no longer a range but a specific figure that sat on a page in my attorney's office. I did not call. I invited them to dinner. My house, my table. The specific reversal of the Sunday dinner where they had presented their division as settled. They arrived expecting something ordinary. My mother brought wine. My father had the relaxed energy of a man who considers most matters with his daughter to be, at this point, concluded. I waited until after dinner. Then I placed Patricia's preliminary report on the table. "I need you to read something," I said. My father read it first. He was an engineer. He understood documents. He read carefully and completely before responding. When he finished, he looked up. "Emily," he said. "Yes," I said. "This is real," I said. "Patricia has 30 years of experience. The specialist she used is internationally recognized. The authentication is solid." My mother had taken the report now. I watched her read, watched the specific moment when the numbers registered. "Arthur," she said, softly, not to me, to the air. "You knew." "He knew," I said. "He wrote me a letter. It was at the bottom of the personal box." "He never said." "He said it to me," I said, "in the letter. He said you never paid attention. He said I was the only one who sat with him and wanted to understand what things were worth." Claire came the following week. I had called her separately. She sat at my kitchen table and I showed her the report and the letter, and she read both in silence. When she finished, she was quiet for a long time. "He always liked you more," she said, "not with bitterness, with something more honest. I used to be jealous of it. I thought it was just because you were similar." "It wasn't just that," I said. "I paid attention, that's all. I sat with him and paid attention." "I know," she said. "I should have." "It wouldn't have changed the collection," I said. "That was always his and then mine." "I know," she said. "Are you going to sell?" "Some of it," I said, "not all." She nodded. "Emily, I'm glad it was you." And the specific quality of that sentence, from a sister who had received the house and was watching her younger sister hold something worth more than she had imagined, was something I had not expected. Genuine, without performance. I believed her. The authenticated pieces sold at a specialist auction 4 months later. The remaining collection I kept, not for financial reasons, because they were his. Because he had chosen them with intention over 40 years, because sitting with them in the room in my house where I have arranged them, I can feel the specific presence of a man who understood that the people who pay attention are the ones who deserve to keep what they find. He left me the storage unit. Everyone thought it was the lesser inheritance. It was the only one that was real.